Today I slept a little, then I felt completely collected. After becoming collected, I felt my head take off. I was with Jesus. How happy I was. Yes, I suffered so much in my head. I complained a little because he is leaving me alone. I begged him also to tell me when Mother Maria Teresa would be in heaven. He said, "Not yet, she's still suffering." I commended my poor sinner to him, and he blessed me and all the members of the Sacro Collegio, and he left me in a happy state. This evening I felt I could not collect myself. I said a few evening prayers and went to bed. To tell the truth, I foresaw a bit of a storm because Jesus had warned me a few days ago, saying, "The enemy will try you with one final battle, but it will be the last because now that is enough." I could not help but thank him for the strength he had always given me, and I prayed that he would want to give me strength for this final test as well, that is to say, last night. I went to bed, as you know well, with the intention of sleeping. Slumber was not long in coming, when almost instantly a tiny, tiny man appeared, all covered in black hair. What a fright! He put his hands on my bed, and I thought he wanted to hit me. "No, no," he said, "I am not able to hit you. Don't be afraid." And as he said this, he lay down on the bed. I called Jesus to help me, but he did not come. But this doesn't mean he abandoned me. As soon as I called his name, I felt liberated, but it was sudden. Other times I had called Jesus, but he had never been ready, like last night. You should have seen the demon afterwards, how angry. He rolled around on the floor, cursing. He made one last effort to take away the cross I had with me, but then he instantly fell backward. How good Jesus was with me last night. The devil, after that last effort, turned toward me and said that since he had not been able to do anything, he wished to torment me the rest of the night. "No," I told him. I called my guardian angel, who opened his wings and alighted next to me. He blessed me, and the bad devil ran away. Jesus be thanked. This morning I learned that at the very moment the devil was rising in fury, the scapular of Our Lady of Sorrows had been placed on me, and I realized that when the devil was trying to take something off of me, it could be nothing but that. My mother, Our Lady of Sorrows, also be thanked. Yesterday during the day, I had to talk with my guardian angel once again. He reproached me above all for my laziness about prayer. He reminded me of many other things, all about the eyes. Still, he threatened me severely. Last night in church, he reminded me again of what he had said that day, telling me I would have to reckon with Jesus. Finally, before going to bed, as I was asking his blessing, he warned me that today, August 20th, Jesus wished me to undergo an assault from the demon. This because for several days I had been negligent in prayer. He warned me that the devil would make every effort to prevent me from praying, especially mentally for all of today, and he would also deprive me of his visit, I mean my guardian angels, but only for today. I went to Holy Communion, but who knows in what a state, so distracted, with my mind still on last night, that is, on a bad dream, which I recognized as the work of the devil. Oh God, the moment of the assault has come, and it was strong, even terrible, I would almost say. No sign of the cross, no scapular, was enough to halt the most ugly temptation one could imagine. He was so horrifying that I closed my eyes and never opened them again until I was absolutely freed. My God, if I am without sin, I owe it only to you. You be thanked. What to say in those moments? To look for Jesus and not find him is a greater penance than the temptation itself. What I feel only Jesus knows, who watches secretly and is pleased. At a certain point, when it seemed the temptation would take on more force, it came to mind to invoke the Holy Father of Jesus, and I shouted, "Eternal Father, for the blood of Jesus, free me." I don't know what happened. That good-for-nothing devil gave me such a strong shove that I fell off the bed, causing me to bang my head on the floor with such great force that I felt a sharp pain. I fainted and remained on the ground for a long time before regaining consciousness. Jesus be thanked that today also everything turned out in the best way, as he wished. The rest of the day went wonderfully. In the evening, as it happens to me many times, all my grave sins came to mind, but with such enormity that I had to make a great effort not to cry out loud. I felt a pain more alive than I had ever undergone before. The number of my sins surpasses by 1,000-fold my age and my capacity. But what consoled me is that I endured the greatest pain because of my sins, so that I wished this pain would never be canceled from my mind and never be diminished. My God, to what point my malice has reached. This evening, to say the truth, I was awaiting Jesus. No way. No one showed up. Only my guardian angel does not cease to watch over me, to instruct me, and to give me wise counsel. Many times during the day he reveals himself to me and talks to me. Yesterday he kept me company while I ate, but he didn't force me like the others do. After I had eaten, I didn't feel at all well, so he brought me a cup of coffee so good that I was healed instantly, and then he made me rest a little. Many times I make him ask Jesus for permission to stay with me all night. He goes to ask, and then he does not leave me until morning, if Jesus approves. Still later, I went to church for the usual blessing, but I felt tired. In fact, I truly was, but it is not, as I've said many times, true tiredness. It is laziness, a lack of desire to pray. My guardian angel whispered in my ear that I should pray even while sitting. At first, I could not give in, but he insisted a second time, and so for obedience I remained sitting. For sure I was pleased about this, since I was unable to stay on my knees. Last night he also made me understand that when Jesus complains about me because I do not do my meditation, he does not mean Thursday and Friday, he means the other days of the week. In fact, it's true, because on those 2 days I never forget. I promised to be more conscientious, and he ordered me to bed, saying I was tired and I had to sleep. I urged him to stay with me, but he made no promise, and in fact, he did not stay. Now then, I said to him, run to Jesus and plead with him, because tomorrow evening I must go to confession, and I need to see him. And he instantly responded, and if Brother Gabriel should come? That would be the same, I answered. Either Jesus or Brother Gabriel. One way or another, I need a visit. Beg him to concede me this grace. I need it. Can you tell me? He asked. As for you, I responded, go to Jesus and tell him everything, and then return and tell me. He nodded yes. He had spoken to me a few minutes ago about Brother Gabriel, and, as always, even just hearing about him made me happy all over, so I could not refrain from exclaiming, Brother Gabriel, how long I have been awaiting him, how much I desire him. Just so, because you have such a strong desire, Jesus does not want to satisfy you. Then, laughing, he instructed me that when Jesus came, I should not let him know that I had a desire to see Brother Gabriel, in which case Jesus would grant my wish easily. I realized he was kidding, because I know nothing can be hidden from Jesus. Show indifference, he repeated, and you will see that Jesus will send him more often. I won't be able to do that, I said. I'll teach you. You have to talk like this to Jesus. If he comes, fine. If not, it's all the same. And in saying this, he laughed heartily. So I also repeated the phrase, but I understood that he was having fun. He ordered me to bed, saying I had to stay alone that night because if he stayed, I would never get to sleep, and he left. It's true, because when he is there, I do not sleep. He teaches me so many things about heaven, and the night passes quickly, very quickly. But last night was not like that. He left me alone, and I slept. Although I did awaken several times, and instantly he said, Sleep, otherwise I'm going away for real. I heard loud thunderclaps, very loud, and I was afraid, so he came and made himself visible. He blessed me once again, and I went back to sleep. How many consolations Jesus gives me, in how many ways he shows me his love. They are all things of my head, but if I obey, Jesus will not permit me to be deceived. Thursday evening, he promised that in these days, when Mrs. Cecilia was away, he would not leave me without my guardian angel. He gave me the angel last night, and from then on, he has not left me for even a moment. This I have observed many times, and I have not spoken of it even with my confessor, but today I tell all. When I am with other people, my guardian angel never leaves me. However, when I am with her, the angel immediately leaves me. I mean to say that he does not show himself anymore, except to give me some warnings. The same thing happened today. He never left my side for a minute. If I have to speak, to pray, to do something, he lets me know. May Jesus not allow me to be deceived. This thing so astounds me that it obliged me to ask of him, How is it that when Mrs. Cecilia is with me, you never stay around? He answered like this: No person, other than she, knows how to take my place. Poor girl, he added, you are so little that you always need a guide. Fear not, for now I shall do it, but obey. I went to confession. I told this to my confessor. I had also written to him about it. So he explained what I did not understand, so now I understand everything. Yesterday, while eating, I raised my eyes and saw my guardian angel looking at me with an expression so severe I was frightened. He did not speak. Later, when I went to bed for a moment, my God, he commanded me to look him in the face. I looked, and then almost immediately I lowered my gaze, but he insisted and said, Aren't you ashamed to commit sins in my presence? You certainly feel ashamed after you commit them. He insisted I look at him. For more than half an hour he made me stay in his presence looking him in the face. He gave me some very stern looks. I did nothing but cry. I commended myself to my God, to our mother, to get me out of there because I could not resist much longer. Every so often he repeated, I am ashamed of you. I prayed that others would not see him in that state because then no one would ever come near me. I don't know if others saw him. I suffered for an entire day, and whenever I lifted my eyes, he always looked at me sternly. I could not collect myself for even a minute. That evening I said my prayers anyway, and he was always there watching me with the same expression. He let me go to bed, but he did bless me. He never abandoned me. He stayed with me for several hours without speaking and always stern. I never did have the courage to speak a word to him. I only said, My God, what shame if others should see my angel so angry. There was no way I could sleep last night. I was awake until after 2 o'clock. I know because I heard the clock strike. I stayed in bed, not moving, my mind turned to God, but without praying. Finally, after the clock struck 3, I saw my guardian angel approaching. He placed his hand on my forehead and said these words, Sleep, bad girl. I saw him no more. And then on the following day, St. Gemma shared this in the entry dated August 27th, which was on Monday, where she wrote, This morning I received Holy Communion. I hardly had the courage to receive it. Jesus seemed to let me know a little about why my guardian angel was acting this way. I had made my last confession badly. Unfortunately, this was true. And then, on August 28th, my guardian angel remained very stern until this morning, after I revealed everything to my confessor. Upon my exiting from the confessional, he looked at me happily, with an air of kindness. I returned from death to life. Later he spoke to me on his own, because I did not have the courage to question him. He asked me how I was, because I was not feeling well the night before. I answered that only he could cure me. He came near, caressed me again and again, and said I should be good. Just a little note here. St. Gemma said she did not feel well here because her angel was angry at her due to the poor confession she had previously made, and that's why she was seeking his forgiveness. So continuing on with the entry, August 28th, she wrote, Repeatedly I asked him if he loved me as much as before, and if he loved me despite everything. He answered in this way, Today I am not ashamed of you, yesterday I was. I asked many times for forgiveness, and he indicated that I was forgiven for every past action. Finally, I sent him to Jesus for 3 things. If he was happy with me now, if he had forgiven everything, that he should rid me of this shame so that I could be obedient to my confessor. He went away instantly and returned very late. He said Jesus was very happy that he has forgiven me, but for the last time. As to the shame, he said Jesus responded with these exact words, Tell her to obey perfectly. Later then, I went to bed, and after a little while I felt some remorse. I was thinking, it's true, on the subject of a meditation on the Passion, but in bed. My guardian angel asked what I was thinking. About the Passion, I answered. What will Jesus say about me, who leads such an easy life, praying little, and in bed? In short, all my time in prayer I spend in bed. Unfortunately, all this is true. He answered by asking what I thought. It is laziness, I responded. But I promised that from that evening on, I would never again pray in bed, except for the day that I was supposed to, out of obedience. Last evening and for the whole night he never left me, but with an agreement. I must be quiet and sleep. I did it. Toward evening I went to confession, and the confessor, believing I was not feeling well, because I had been suffering some, ordered me to go to bed as soon as I entered my room, and he ordered me to sleep without speaking with my guardian angel, because sometimes we would talk for hours on end, and that I should sleep. I went to bed, but I could not fall asleep out of the curiosity I had. I wanted to ask my guardian angel so many things, and I waited for him to speak on his own, but no way. All he told me was to go to sleep several times. Finally, I fell asleep. Tonight, I slept with my guardian angel by my side. Upon awakening, I saw him next to me. He asked me where I was going. To Jesus, I answered. The rest of the day went very well. But my God, toward evening, what happened? My guardian angel got serious and stern. I could not figure out the reason, but he, from whom nothing can be hidden, in a stern tone, at the moment when I started to recite my usual prayers, asked me what I was doing. I am praying. Who are you waiting for? Becoming yet more serious. Without thinking, I said, Brother Gabriel. Upon hearing me pronounce those words, he started to yell at me, saying I was waiting in vain. And here I remember 2 sins I had committed during the day. My God, what sternness! He pronounced these words more than once. I am ashamed of you. I will end up by not coming to you anymore, and maybe who knows if even tomorrow. And he left me in that state. He made me cry so much. I want to ask forgiveness, but when he is that angry, there is no way he wants to forgive. I did not see him again that night, nor this morning. Today he told me to adore Jesus, who was alone, and then he disappeared again. This evening it was much better than the evening before. I asked him many times for forgiveness, and he seemed willing to forgive me. Tonight he stayed with me constantly. He repeated that I should be good and not give further disgust to our Jesus, and when I am in his presence, I should try to be better. St. Gemma wrote her autobiography at the insistent request of Father Germanus, who became her spiritual director in January 1900, approximately 3 years before her death. At first, he directed his spiritual daughter by the letter, coming to Lucca to see her for the first time in September 1900. He found Gemma writing a diary of the graces she received day by day. She was writing this diary under obedience to her regular confessor, Monsignor Volpi, auxiliary bishop of Lucca. Judging on general principles that it was not good to concentrate to such an extent on what was happening within, Father Germanus ordered her to stop and made her hand over to him all that she had written. But later, as he read the diary, he realized that while the principle on which he had acted was true, it did not apply to Gemma's case. He realized, in short, that he was dealing with a most extraordinary person. In order to remedy this mistake, he asked her to write for him a general confession of all her sins, that he might be better able to direct her. He knew that she could not write of her sins without telling the graces which made them appear so great to her. Gemma complied with his wish, though with great reluctance, as is indicated by the autobiography itself. In her letters, Gemma always refers to this document as her general confession. At the same time, however, it is evident that she did not look upon it as a sacramental confession. At least twice in the pages of the autobiography, she passes over points, explaining that she will tell him in confession. The autobiography, thus written in obedience to Father Germanus, filled 93 pages of a notebook, all written in her own hand. It covers the years from her infancy until September 1900, when she was 22 years old. She began writing the autobiography on February 17, 1901, and finished it in May of the same year. The manuscript copy of the autobiography still exists today, but a remarkable fact about the notebook is that every page has the appearance of having been burned. Father Germanus explains this phenomenon in his Life of Saint Gemma. Gemma's manuscript, when finished, was by my orders given to the charge of her adopted mother, Signora Cecilia Giannini, who kept it hidden in a drawer, awaiting the first opportunity of handing it to me. Some days elapsed, and Gemma thought she saw the demon pass through the window of the room where the drawer was, chuckling, and then disappearing in the air. Accustomed as she was to such apparitions, she thought nothing of it. But he, having returned shortly after to molest her, as often happened, with a repulsive temptation, and having failed, left gnashing his teeth and declaring exultantly, "War, war, your book is in my hands." So she wrote to tell me. Then, owing to the obedience which she was under to disclose to her vigilant benefactress everything extraordinary that happened to her, she thought she was obliged to tell her what had occurred. They went, opened the drawer, and found that the book was no longer there. I was written to at once, and it was easy to imagine my consternation at having lost such a treasure. What was to be done? I thought a great deal about it, and just then, while at the tomb of blessed Gabriel, a fresh idea came to my mind. I resolved to exorcise the devil and thus force him to return the manuscript if he had really taken it. With my ritual stole and holy water, I went to the tomb of the blessed servant of God. And there, although nearly 400 miles from Lucca, I pronounced the exorcism in regular form, and at the same hour the writing was restored to the place from which it had been taken several days before. But in what a state! The pages from top to bottom were all smoked, and parts burned, as if each one had been separately exposed over a strong fire, yet they were not so badly burned as to destroy the writing. This document, having thus passed through a hellfire, is in my hands. Earlier in this video, I touched a little on how St. Gemma was reluctant to share her stories, but out of obedience she did it anyway, and I guess it's worth sharing what she wrote to Father Germanus about this. My dear Father, you must understand that at first I intended to make a general confession of my sins without adding anything else, but your guardian angel reproved me and told me to obey and give a short summary of all that has happened in my life, both good and bad. How difficult it is, dear Father, to obey in this matter, but please be careful. You may read and reread this as often as you wish, but do not show it to anyone else, and when you are through with it, burn it up immediately. Do you understand? The angel promised to help me recall everything to mind. I told him plainly and pleaded with him that I do not want to do this. I was frightened at the thought of recalling everything, but the angel assured me that he would help me. I think, dear Father, that when you read this and learn of all my sins, you will be angry with me and will no longer want to be my Father. Still, I hope that you will always be willing. So prepare yourself to learn of every kind of sin. And you, dear Father, do you approve of what the angel told me, that I should speak of my whole life? That's his order, and I take for granted that's what is in your mind and heart. By writing everything, both good and bad, you will be able to see better how bad I have been and how good others have been to me. You will see how ungrateful I have shown myself toward Jesus and how much I have failed to listen to the good advice of my parents and teachers. So I begin the task, dear Father, live Jesus. So by now, we have covered and learned a lot about the life of this wonderful saint, Saint Gemma, especially in regards to her relationship with her guardian angel, Jesus, and the Blessed Mother. And there's one entry in her diary that makes me question how I've been living my own life when I know my guardian angel is around me, even though I can't see him. And so this particular entry is dated March 31st, 1899, and she wrote, "On the morning of Good Friday, I received Holy Communion, and I would have liked to have gone to the services that day in honor of the agony. But my family would not permit it, even though I wept. With great difficulty I made this first sacrifice to Jesus. And Jesus, always so generous, saw fit to reward me, even though I made the sacrifice with much difficulty. I shut myself in my room, therefore, to make the hour of agony alone. But I was not alone. My guardian angel came to me, and we prayed together. We assisted Jesus in all his sufferings and compassionated our mother in her sorrows. But my angel did not fail to give me a gentle rebuke, telling me that I should not cry when I had to make a sacrifice to Jesus, but that I should rather thank those who offered me the occasion to do so. This was the first time, and also the first Friday, on which Jesus made himself felt so strongly in my soul. And although I did not receive communion from the hands of a priest because it was impossible, Jesus nevertheless came himself and communicated himself to me. And this union with him was so overwhelming that I remained as if stupefied. Jesus spoke very strongly to me. "What are you doing?" he said to me. "What have you to say? Aren't you ever moved at all?" Then it was that, not being able to resist any longer, I blurted out, "Oh, Jesus, how is it that you, who are most perfect and all holy, choose one so full of coldness and imperfection to love?" He answered, "I am burning with desire to unite myself with you. Hasten to receive me every morning. But remember that I am a father and a zealous spouse. Will you be my daughter and my faithful spouse?" I made 1,000 promises to Jesus that morning, but my God, how soon I forgot them. I always felt a horror for sin, but at the same time, I was always committing it. And Jesus was not satisfied with me, though he ever consoled me, sending my guardian angel to be my guide in everything. After these things happened to me, I felt that I should speak to my confessor about them. I went to confession, but I did not have the courage. I left the confessional without saying anything about it. I returned home, and on entering my room, I noticed that my angel was weeping. I didn't have the courage to ask him what he was crying about, but he himself told me, "Do you want to be deprived of seeing me anymore? You are a bad girl. You are hiding things from your confessor. Remember this, and I am telling you for the last time, if you ever hide anything else from your confessor, I will never let you see me anymore. Never, never." I fell to my knees, and he told me to make an act of contrition and made me promise to reveal everything to my confessor. With this, he pardoned me in the name of Jesus. One day, a lady who often came to visit me brought me a book to read, The Life of Venerable Gabriel. I took it almost disdainfully and put it on the pillow. The lady begged me to recommend myself to Gabriel, but I thought little of it. One day I was alone. It was a little after noon. I was attacked by a strong temptation, and I said within myself that I was tired of all this, and staying in bed annoyed me. The devil took advantage of these thoughts and began to tempt me, saying that if I had listened to him, he would have cured me and would have done all that I asked of him. Dear Father, I was on the point of giving in. I was disturbed and felt that I was conquered. But suddenly a thought came to me. My mind turned to Venerable Gabriel, and I said fervently, "The soul comes first, and then the body." Nevertheless, the devil continued with even stronger assaults. 1,000 ugly thoughts rushed through my mind. Again I turned to Venerable Gabriel, and with his help, I conquered. Entering within myself, I made the sign of the cross, and in a quarter of an hour, I turned to unite myself with God, whom I so little appreciated. I recalled that on that very evening, I began to read the life of Brother Gabriel. I read it several times. I never grew tired of reading it and admiring his virtues and his example. My resolutions were many, my deeds but few. From the day on which my new protector, Venerable Gabriel, saved my soul, I began to practice a special devotion to him. At night, I could not sleep unless I had his picture under my pillow, and from that day to this, I began to see him near me. Here, dear Father, I do not know how to express myself. I have felt his presence. In every act, in every bad action that I have performed, I thought of Brother Gabriel, and thereupon ceased the action. I have never failed to pray to him every day in these words, "The soul comes before the body." One day the lady who had brought me the life of Venerable Gabriel came to take it back. In taking it from under my pillow and giving it back to her, I could not help weeping. The lady, seeing that it was so hard for me to give it up, promised to come back later and get it when the person who had given it to her requested it. She came back a few days later, and I had to give it back to her, though I did so weeping. This caused me much displeasure, but that saint of God very soon rewarded this little sacrifice, for that night, in a dream, he appeared to me clothed in white. I did not recognize him, dear Father. When he saw that I did not recognize him, he opened the white garment, and I saw him clothed as a passionist. I knew him immediately. I remained in silence before him. He asked me why I had cried when they took his life from me. I don't recall what I answered, but he said, "See how much your sacrifice has pleased me. It has pleased me so much that I have come myself to see you. Do you wish me well?" I did not answer. Then he comforted me and said to me, "Be good, because I will return to see you." He told me to kiss his habit and rosary, and then he went away. My imagination started working, and I found myself always awaiting another visit from him, but he did not come again for many, many months. Here is how it happened. The Feast of the Immaculate Conception came. At that time, the nuns, Sisters of Charity, were coming to change my clothing and tend to me. Among those who came there was one who was not yet vested in the habit, and who was not vested until 2 years later because she was too young. On the vigil of the feast, the nuns came as usual, and while they were there, I had an inspiration. I thought within myself, tomorrow is the feast of our Blessed Mother. If I should promise her that if she would cure me, I would become a Sister of Charity, what would happen? This thought consoled me. I told it to Sister Leonilda, and she promised that if I were cured, I could be vested with the novice of whom I spoke above. All that remained was that I should make the promise the next morning after Holy Communion. Monsignor came to hear my confession, and he immediately gave his permission. He also gave me another consolation. We made a perpetual vow of virginity together that evening, a vow which previously he had never allowed me to make. He renewed it, and I made it for the first and last time. What tremendous graces, but I have never corresponded with them. That evening I was in perfect peace. Night came, and I went to sleep. All of a sudden I saw my protector standing before me at the foot of my bed. He said to me, "Gemma, make the vow to become a religious gladly, but add nothing else." "But why?" I asked. Touching me on the forehead while he looked at me and smiled, he answered, "My sister." I did not understand what it was all about. To thank him, I kissed his habit. He took the woolen heart, which Passionists wear on their breast, had me kiss it, and then placed it on the sheet over my heart, and again said to me, "My sister." With that, he disappeared. The next morning there was nothing on the sheet. I went to communion and afterwards made my promise, but added nothing else. I did not speak of this either with the nuns or with my confessor. At that time and many times later, the nuns reminded me of my vow because they thought I had promised to become a Sister of Charity, and they told me that our Blessed Mother could cure me. Jesus graciously accepted my vow, and my poor heart was very glad. From the moment when my mother inspired me with the desire for heaven, I have always, even in the midst of so many sins, wanted it ardently. If God had left the choice to me, I would have preferred to escape from the body and fly to heaven. Every time a fever came upon me and I felt ill, I experienced a great consolation. But this changed to sorrow when, after some illness, I would feel my strength return. One day after Holy Communion, I asked Jesus why he did not take me to heaven. He answered, "My daughter, I do not take you because during your life I will give you many occasions to gain more merit, increasing your desire for heaven as you bear the trials of life with patience." These words in no way diminished my desire. Rather, I felt it increasing in me day by day. During the same year of 1896, another desire began to grow in me. I began to feel an ever greater yearning to love Jesus crucified very much, and at the same time a desire to suffer with him and to help him in his sufferings. One day, as I was looking at the crucifix, so great a sorrow came over me that I fell to the floor. My father was in the house at the time, and he began to reprove me, saying that it was not good for me to stay at home, and that I should go out early the next morning. He had not let me go to Mass the last 2 mornings. I answered in a disturbed tone of voice, "It is not good for me to remain away from Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament." My answer disturbed him because he noticed that my voice was not very strong. I hid myself in a room, and there, for the first time, I gave vent to my sorrow with Jesus alone. "Dear Father, I do not remember the words I spoke, but my angel is here, and he tells me what I said, word for word. It is as follows. I want to follow you no matter what the cost in pain, and to follow you fervently. No, Jesus, I do not want to continue displeasing you by a tepid life as I have done up to now. That would amount to coming to you to bring you displeasure. Therefore, I resolve to make my prayer more devout and my communions more frequent. Jesus, I want to suffer and to suffer much for you. Prayer will ever be on my lips. If even he falls often who makes frequent resolutions, what will happen to him who resolves but rarely? Dear Father, these words came from my heart in that moment of sorrow and of hope when I was alone with my Jesus. I have made so many resolutions, and I never kept any of them. Every day, amid so many sins of every kind, I would ask Jesus to let me suffer and suffer much. After a little, Jesus sent me a consolation. He sent me a pain in one of my feet. I kept this secret for a while, but the pain was severe. A doctor came and said an operation was necessary, and perhaps the foot would have to be amputated. All of my family was greatly worried, and only I was indifferent. I remember that while they were performing the operation, I cried and complained loudly. But then, looking at Jesus, I begged him to pardon my folly. Jesus also sent me other pains, and I can say with truth that ever since the death of my mother, I have never spent a day without suffering some little thing for Jesus. During this time, I never ceased to commit sins. I became worse every day. I was full of every kind of fault, and I do not understand why Jesus never showed himself angry with me. Only once did I see Jesus angry at me, and I would rather suffer the pains of hell 1,000 times in this life than find myself before Jesus so displeased, and to see before my eyes the horrible picture of my soul. On Christmas Day of 1896, I was permitted to go to Mass and receive Holy Communion. I was about 15 years old at the time, and I had already often asked my confessor for permission to make a vow of virginity. I had asked for this for many years, but I did not really know what it was. It only seemed to me that it was the most beautiful adornment I could offer to Jesus. He would not let me take this vow of virginity, but instead allowed me to make a vow of chastity. So on Christmas night, I made my first vow to Jesus. I remember that Jesus was so pleased with it that he asked me after Holy Communion to unite with this vow the offering of my whole self and all my sentiments in abandonment to his holy will. I did this with such a joy that I spent that night and the next day as if in heaven. That year came to an end, and we entered upon the year of 1897, which was a year of great sorrow for all my family. I, alone being heartless, remained unmoved in the face of so many afflictions. The thing that troubled the others the most was the fact that we were deprived of all means of livelihood, and added to this, my father was seriously ill. One morning after communion, I understood what a great sacrifice Jesus would ask of us soon. I wept very much, but Jesus made himself felt in my soul all the more during those sorrowful days. I saw my father so perfectly resigned to die that I felt strong enough to bear these sorrows very calmly. On the day of his death, Jesus told me not to give way to useless weeping and wailing, so I spent the day praying in resignation to the will of God, who at that moment took the role of both my heavenly and earthly Father. Since Saint Gemma was called by God to be a soul victim, that is, to suffer for the conversion of sinners, it follows that God would give her extraordinary graces to better accomplish this vocation to which he called her. One of the astounding supernatural graces in the life of Saint Gemma is extraordinary assistance of her guardian angel, who was a great help in her sanctification. For those who didn't know this, Saint Gemma saw her guardian angel with her own eyes, touched him with her hand, as if he were a being of this world, and would talk to him as would one friend to another. Jesus, she once said, has not left me alone. He makes my guardian angel stay with me always. Her guardian angel let her see him sometimes raised in the air with outspread wings, with his hands extended over her, or else hands joined in an attitude of prayer. At other times, he would kneel beside her. If they were reciting vocal prayers or the Psalms, they did so alternately. If aspirations or prayers from the heart, in Gemma's own words, they rivaled one another. That is, they had a holy rivalry as to whom would say them with more fervor various beautiful invocations. When it was time for meditation, the angel inspired her with ideas, and moved her affections so that the result of this holy exercise may be more perfect. The subject of these meditations was, for the most part, the Passion of our Lord. The angel, like a good master, laid open its profound mysteries to her soul. "Look," he would exclaim, "at what Jesus suffered for men. Consider each of these wounds. It is love that has opened them all. See how horrible sin is, since to expiate it, so much pain and so much love have been necessary." These and other such reflections went straight to the heart of the fervent Gemma. Here's one occasion where St. Gemma writes the following. I was in bed suffering greatly, when on a sudden I became absorbed in prayer. I joined my hands and moved with heartfelt sorrow for my countless sins. I made an act of deep contrition. My mind was wholly plunged in this abyss of my crime against my God, when I beheld my angel standing by my bed. I felt ashamed of being in his presence. He instead was more than courteous with me and said kindly, Jesus loves thee greatly. Love him greatly in return. Then he added, Are you fond of Jesus' mother? Salute her very often, for she values such attention very much and unfailingly returns the salutations offered to her. And if you do not sense this, know that she makes a proof of your unfailing trust. He blessed me and disappeared. And then here's another one, where St. Gemma writes, One evening when I was suffering more than usual, I was complaining to Jesus and telling him that I would not have prayed so much if I had known that he was not going to cure me, and I asked him why I had to be sick this way. My angel answered me as follows, If Jesus afflicts you in your body, it is always to purify you in your soul. Be good. Oh, how many times during my long illness did I not experience such consoling words in my heart, but I never profited by them. From the moment I got up from my sickbed, my guardian angel began to be my master and guide. He corrected me every time I did something wrong, and he taught me to speak but little, and only when I was spoken to. One day, when those in the house were speaking of some person, and were not speaking very well of her, I wanted to speak up, but the angel gave me a severe rebuke. He taught me to keep my eyes cast down, and one time in church he reproved me strongly, saying to me, Is this the way you conduct yourself in the presence of God? And another time he admonished me in this way, If you are not good, I will not let you see me anymore. He taught me many times how to act in the presence of God, that is, to adore him in his infinite goodness, his infinite majesty, his mercy, and in all his attributes. Once, Gemma's guardian angel ordered her to write the following, Remember, daughter, that whoever truly loves Jesus speaks little and bears all things. I command thee, on behalf of Jesus, to always refrain from giving your own opinion, unless it is asked, always to prefer silence to upholding your own views. Concerning this care that the angel gave her, Father Germano, her spiritual director, says this, Gemma had once been beaten cruelly by the devil during her evening prayer, and being unable to move, the angel lifted her to her bed and stood there watching by her pillow. And there's another that St. Gemma also writes, I recall very well one time I was given a gold watch and chain. Ambitious as I was, I could hardly wait to put it on and go out. An indication, dear Father, that my imagination was working on me. I did in fact go out with it on, and when I returned home and started to take it off, I saw an angel, whom I recognized immediately as my guardian angel, who said to me very seriously, Remember that the precious jewelry that adorns the spouse of the crucified King can only be thorns and the cross. I did not even tell my confessor about this. In fact, I tell it now for the first time. These words made me fear, as did the angel himself. But a little later, while reflecting on them, without understanding them at all, I made this resolution. I resolved for the love of Jesus, and to please him, never to wear the watch again, and not even to speak of things that savor of vanity. At the time, I also had a ring on my finger. I took it off immediately, and from then until now, I have not worn such things. And one of the most unusual angelic errands that Gemma often sent her guardian angel on were the ones that Father Germano writes about in Gemma's biography. Gemma would write a letter to Father Germano seeking some spiritual guidance, and then place it in a little manger shrine that was in her adopted family's home, and because she had no money for stamps, she would request her angel to deliver the letter for her. Father Germano, living several hundred miles away in Rome at the time, would soon find the letter unstamped on his desk, or another such place. And also another reason for the angelic deliveries was the fact that Father Germano traveled extensively in his preaching ministry, and Gemma never knew where to reach him. Realizing how unusual this was, Father Germano asked heaven for a sign that these angelic deliveries were it was in accord with God's will. Afterwards, while he was staying at the Passionist house in Corneto, Italy, a young boy knocked at the door asking for him. Father Germano answered the door, and the boy handed him a letter from Gemma and abruptly turned and left without saying a word. Who was the boy? And how could Gemma have known that he was visiting at Cornetto? He opened the letter and immediately realized that God answered his prayer as to the authenticity of these angelic deliveries. On most other occasions, when these angelic letter deliveries occurred, Father Germano would simply find Gemma's unstamped letter on his desk when he arrived in his office. And later, after St. Gemma's death, Father Germano wrote, "I always received the angelic letters faithfully. The fact is unusual. I confess I do not understand it at all. To how many tests did I submit this singular phenomenon in order to convince myself that it took place through a supernatural intervention, and yet none of my tests ever failed. And thus I was convinced again and again that in this, like in many other extraordinary things in her life, heaven was delighted in amusing itself, as it were, with this innocent and dear maiden." And Father Germano also writes, "When necessary, her guardian angel knew how to show severity. She one day told me this in the following words, 'My angel is a little severe, but I am glad of it.' During the last few days, he corrected me as often as 3 or 4 times a day." Here's another one that St. Gemma writes in regards to the point earlier. "Yesterday, while at table, I raised my eyes and saw my angel looking at me with frightening severity. Later, when I went to my room, oh my God, how angry he was. I looked at him, but lowered my eyes immediately. He said, 'Are you not ashamed to commit such faults in my presence?' He cast such severe looks at me, and I did nothing but cry and recommend myself to my God and to my Blessed Mother, that they might take me away, because I could not bear it much longer. Every now and then he repeated, 'I am ashamed of you.' I prayed also that others might not see him so angry, for if they did, no one would come near me. I did not have courage to say a word to him, for whenever I raised my eyes, he was looking at me severely. Yesterday evening I found it impossible to sleep, and at last, at about 2 a.m., I saw him approach. He put his hand on my forehead, saying, 'Sleep, my poor child.' Then he disappeared." In September 1901, while working in the kitchen, Gemma frequently paused out of her great love for Jesus to contemplate the large crucifix that hung on the kitchen wall of the Giannini home. And the more she looked at it, the more her heart beat in her breast. She strongly desired to come to him and unite with him, and many a time she attempted to. At last she cried out, "Let me come to you, for I am thirsting for you." And as it happened to St. Francis of Assisi, the corpus on the cross became alive, and Jesus appeared to her, and with his right hand detached from the cross, with a loving look he beckoned his faithful bride to come to him. Immediately Gemma rushed to him and reached him, and while miraculously held aloft in the air, Jesus embraces her and lays her lips on the wound in his holy side. Gemma, keeping tight to him with both arms, drank plentifully out of that divine spring, while remaining with her body as if she rested upon a cloud. On another occasion, Jesus appeared to Gemma with the cross on his shoulders and said, "Gemma, will you take my cross? See, this is the present I have prepared for you." And she replied, "My Jesus, yes, give it me, but give me also the strength to carry it, because my shoulders are weak, at least that I may not fall under it." And Jesus again, "Would it sadden you if I were to give you to drink of my chalice even to the last drop?" And Gemma replied, "Jesus, may your most holy will be done." On another occasion, he appeared to Gemma nailed to the cross, all covered with wounds and bleeding. "At that sight," she said, "I felt such a great sorrow, thinking of the infinite love of Jesus for us, and of the sufferings that he had endured for our salvation. I then fainted and fell. After the lapse of an hour or so, I came to myself, and then there arose in my heart such an immense desire to suffer something for him who had suffered so much for me. From that day forward, Gemma did not seem herself. The sight of Jesus suffering and the thought of the mission entrusted to her by God had, as it were, transformed her into another creature. The thirst to suffer torments of every kind seemed to consume and rend her whole being. To satisfy her, torrents of fire would be needed. Listen to her exclamation, to suffer but without any consolation, without any comfort, to suffer for love alone. Her sufferings were but trials in which grace advanced step by step, preparing her for the grand immolation that was to be accomplished on the Calvary of Jesus, her deathbed. Hence, she added, I am very happy. Jesus does not cease to love me. I mean that he does not cease to afflict me more than usual. It was indeed our Lord himself who had taught her this sublime doctrine. On Saturday evening, she writes to me, I went to make a visit to the most holy crucifix. There came upon me an ardent longing for suffering, and with all my heart I implored of Jesus to satisfy me. And since that evening he has granted me a ceaseless pain in my head, but such a violent pain, and I am almost always crying through fear of not being able to bear it. We can see by these words that she feels that she may not be able to hold out, and yet she does not desist, but continues to pray that her great longing to suffer more and more may be gratified. Nay, she declares that in suffering she finds all her delight. Yes, she says, I am happy in every way that Jesus wills, and if Jesus wants the sacrifice of my life, I give it to him at once. If he wants anything else, I am ready. One thing alone is enough for me, to be his victim, in order to atone for my own innumerable sins, and if possible for those of the whole world. From Thursday evening to Friday afternoon each week, as we know, this heroic child went over all Calvary in body and soul, suffering unspeakable agony in company with Jesus crucified. Whoever could have passed but once through such torments would shudder at the thought of them. Gemma, who again and again passed over that way of sorrow and pain, longed for the day, counted the hours she had to wait until it came, and in the words of those who were around her, prepared to suffer as if she were preparing for a banquet. Our Lord took infinite delight in such great generosity and heroism, and by open proofs of tenderness showed his great joy and happiness at having chosen a spouse so entirely according to his heart. Thus, on one of many occasions, making his presence felt in her soul, he asked her if she had suffered much in a long trial that she was still undergoing. Gemma's answer, With thee, O Jesus, one suffers so well. What is it to suffer thus for many days, if afterwards you come quickly and console? And Jesus replied, Know that when you were suffering, I was always at your side. I beheld your distress, and I was gratified by it. Then, to reward her for the courage she had displayed in the conflict, he told her she might draw close and kiss his sacred wounds. And she, all humility, But, O Jesus, why for so little do you give me a reward so great? Then, emboldened by her filial confidence, she approached her Savior, and kneeling with her heart all on fire, she kissed one by one those precious wounds. But when she came to the wound in his side, she could hold out no longer, and fell in a swoon at the feet of her Jesus.